Hi everyone, welcome to my video on the ACCA P7 Advanced Audit and Assurance. As some of you may already realize that I teach the paper P7 in Singapore. Uh, I've been teaching this for a while, and there are certain recurring problems which I thought would be very interesting for all of you out there who are taking this paper. And if you're taking this paper, I think this is good advice, and having seen the number of scripts that were marked, and I think there are very good lessons to share, right? Let me begin. So some common issues. Many students went through the same path, going through this paper. Now it is honestly not an easy paper for many reasons. One is that this paper really is a hybrid paper. It's a combination of P2 and F8, and it involves like a lot of business sense and quite a bit of general knowledge, as in general knowledge pertaining to business, which typically for students who have not have much work experience, it can be quite difficult to to understand, right? I mean the issues with, for example, a manufacturing business, manufacturing electronic goods, for example, right? What concerns are there, with manufacturing electronic goods? And another example, what the issues with operating a mining company, a company that operates, that has an operation in mining coal or mining certain resource, So these are all very poorly understood, and in fact, because of this, in every mock exam, it is never surprising to see the same issues repeating again and again. Like every intake, I always tend to see large number of students who are not able to distinguish between business risk and audit risk. They tend to mistaken these two as the same. And I like to add, business risk and audit risk are not the same, right? You have to, understand what makes them so different, right? They are totally different concepts. Other things, students, when they attempt the P7 mock paper, many demonstrate the inability to apply the FRS, and the FRS is an important component because you need to be able to debate the issues, right, and be able to apply the FRS in a given scenario, and understand why in a given scenario why the FRS have not been properly complied with. So a good understanding of how the FRS is applied is essential, right? So like I often tell students that if you are taking P2, then it's wonderful because while you are taking P2, they'll allow you to understand the questions in P7, right, because they are in a way quite closely related. Now I'd like to add finally, for the introduction, it is also apparent that some are hoping to escape proper preparation, but the honest truth is that there is no escape. You can't escape proper preparation for this exam, if I can say thorough preparation. Thorough preparation is essential, right? You can't, prepare for this paper like how you prepare for paper F1, F2, or F3, right? If you took the earlier papers, well, you know what, you can probably uh, get lucky, get by scoring some on the MCQs, and you can make it through the exams. But the paper P7 is not such a paper. You can't get by without a thorough amount of preparation. And after all, you know what, considering that this is the final paper for most students, I really see no good reason why why should there be a lack of thorough preparation. When I mean thorough preparation, it means that you practice at least 3 years to 5 years of exam papers, go through these, understand the issues. Yeah, that is thorough preparation. Go through at least 3 years to 5 years of exam papers, and that gives you a good amount of foundation, and confidence, and at least understanding of the expectations of the examiner. Okay, moving on. Now, in the history of the P7 exams, question 1 is, without fail, uh, going to cover the topic of risk, right? And it's a wonderful question, to score, because it gives you very easy 35 marks, 35. If you can score most of this 35 marks, then uh, it makes your job of passing the paper extremely simple, easier, in fact. It is also the same question, question 1, which differentiates between well and poorly prepared candidates. And this is the same question where many students overlook the differences between audit risk and business risk. Now, I'd like to add, business risk may sometimes relate to an audit risk. Right? They may, and most of the time you notice that an audit risk may be connected with business risk. There are also other cases where the business risk doesn't relate to any other audit risk, right? And what is audit risk? Audit risk is referring to the risk that the auditor gives an inappropriate opinion, right? So, and why is it that the auditor gives an inappropriate opinion? That's because, for example, the procedures performed wouldn't allow him to reach an appropriate conclusion and to be able to give an appropriate opinion, right? And what would cause the auditor not to be able to come to an appropriate opinion? This could be due to, for example, the use of staff not experienced enough. That increases the detection risk, or it could be due to the nature of the business and other factors that contribute to the higher risk of giving an inappropriate opinion. Include, for instance, ineffective control systems. Right? Ineffective control systems would therefore surely affect the reliability of the figures in the financial statements. So, it's very simple. If the figures in the financial statements and the ledger are not reliable, then that means there's a high risk that the auditor is likely not to be able to derive proper conclusions and to be able to come to an appropriate opinion. That's obviously a matter of fact, and only when internal controls are effective, then that effective controls reduce the amount of the frequency of errors, the likelihood of fraud. This should reduce. Now, whereas business risk refers to the risk that certain events or circumstances that if these occur, may impact the ability of the business to achieve its objectives. For example, profitability. Now, one of the examples of business risk, and I sometimes quote to my students, is, for example, if you run a convenience store, what could be a business risk? The business risk could be that your online competitors, rivals, they steal your customers. For example, customers prefer to order from your online competitors than ordering from your shop. Right? That could be an example. Right? So other types of business risk includes, like, for instance, you manufacture electronic goods. So then, of course, the risk with manufacturing electronic goods is the high risk of obsolescence of a technology. That's a business risk, because as you develop new technologies, these face real risk of becoming obsolete, and in some cases sooner than expected. And if technology that you have becomes obsolete earlier than expected, then that means it impacts on the ability of the business to remain competitive and to be able to attract sales, for instance. So the focus is very different, right? But here I'm not trying to define for you or explain to you what I mean by audit and business risk. Right? So my point is that they are different. And question 1 is one where very often there are elements of F7 and P2. Certain things such as provisions, contingent liabilities, and impairment tend to recur in this question 1. And if you attempted the past 3 years worth of exam papers, you realize these are common topics. Just not long ago, I was talking to some students, and It's surprising, no? I came across students that, they are taking P2 and also taking the P7 exams. You'll be very surprised that um, they are not, they do not even know that provisions need to be discounted to present value, right? Why? Because a provision is an obligation in the future, right? And this obligation is happening in the future, where there is going to be an outflow of economic resource. Now, the key thing is that this is something that will happen in the future. Now, if it's, for example, an obligation to reinstate or to restore a certain place to its original condition, for example, or to commit to certain activities in the future, maybe 5 years later, now those obviously need to be discounted to present value, right? Because it's such a long period of time, 5 years, or maybe 7 years or 10 years. Those obviously need to be discounted to present value, right? And then such a provision for reinstatement would also uh, need to be depreciated over the useful life. Okay, depreciated like an asset. And such provisions also include certain amounts of estimates, right? And which means that if you need to discount the provision to present value, then there has been an assumption made about the discount rate. So it is very surprising, maybe not so surprising after having taught this for quite a few intakes. It is quite unsurprising that there are students who just can't recite all these uh, requirements, like the discount rate, for example, that uh, the provision amount has to be discounted to present value. This tends to be a problem. Uh, for example, contingent liability. It is, like quite unfortunate to realize that there are students who don't realize what is contingent liability. Now, you need to understand that contingent liabilities are basically those liabilities that are uncertain, and and these are subject to certain events happening or not happening, right? And don't forget, if a contingent liability becomes very probable, more likely than not, then that contingent liability has to be reflected as a provision. Students don't realize that, and many I came across just take it that the provision will never change, the provision will remain static. Provisions itself also is subject to adjustments. For example, warranty. Right, the more goods you sell, the greater the provision for warranty. However, if lesser goods are sold, then the provision for warranty should also reduce, in proportion. But this is quite poorly understood. At the same time, question 1, audit procedures and events and evidence are frequently tested. Now, but the subject matter is always somewhat random, because it could cover an asset, liability, or something else. Most students do badly because they don't realize the importance of certain keywords, right? Certain keywords would be like examine, inspect, observe, these are all very important keywords. And you're supposed to avoid certain taboo words like, for example, uh, documents or check. Now, beware, the use of such words is very vague. It doesn't demonstrate understanding. The examiner's report frequently point out the importance of choosing very specific words to answer uh, the question on audit procedures or evidence. Now, what do I mean by specific words? For example, if you are referring to real estate and the value of real estate, then you need to point out the need to look at the valuation report, for instance. Now, for instance, if you, let's say, for example, you want to test for impairment, right? What must you do? And then you need to perform this recalculation, of the workings, right? That that were involved in the impairment testing, right? And where do you get these workings from? You have to get it from the management or the accountant, right? And one more, like another one, say, for instance, to verify the ownership of a real estate, what do you do? Okay, to determine the ownership of real estate, then you have to use this document known as title deed. So you see there are these documents that you need to be aware of. Now, however, um, students I know of, they tend to be a bit more careless, and they don't realize you have to make sure that you bear uh, the name of these documents in mind, and they can make a very big difference between pass and fail. The other question, in almost every exam, there is surely one question that tests elements of the FRS, whatever FRS is it, inventory, provision, revenue, leases, and so on. Now, it is unsurprising and predictable that there are always students who demonstrate poor understanding of the FRS, and therefore inability to apply the FRS, and as a result, being unable to formulate the appropriate required audit procedure. Okay, right? There is a typo with that. It's not produced but procedure and evidence. At times, some students are prone to excessive recitation from the question. Now, avoid copying too much from the question. Don't copy too much of the background from the question. Summarize that, because if you are going to recite too much from the question, it has no bonus marks to you all. It gives you no bonus value to your marks. Your marks you know, will not be significantly improved because recitation doesn't demonstrate that you know what you're doing. In fact, the examiner might even question your understanding of the question. When you're uncertain over what to start with, a very simple area to start with is to calculate the materiality of the items concerned. And because, if you observe some questions give you the total revenue and the total assets. These are indications that you have to calculate the materiality. Right? Okay, and obviously, material items that may demand more additional audit procedures, more work to be done by the auditor. Now, calculating the materiality of the items concerned is an easy area to score. Now, you should not miss that. Common topics from AVID. While P7 is supposed to be a level higher than AVID, it is, again, unsurprising that students fail to revise the easy topics like ethics. Right? Why? Because of the assumption that it's easy. You don't really have to spend much effort at it. Now, don't forget these are examinable. Okay, even though these are easy, you still need to be prepared for it. One day, there was a question on ethics in the mock exams, and many students couldn't identify. They could identify the ethical threats, but they had great difficulty recommending the appropriate safeguards. Most would just dump some random safeguard into the script. Now that's unacceptable, And not only that, you're also expected to justify why you would suggest certain safeguards. That's important, Right? Don't just try to throw out some random safeguard and hope that you can get some marks. Doesn't work like that. Other unpopular areas. Another unpopular area is the subsequent event. Now this is an extremely unpopular topic. In a recent mock paper, almost none of the students wanted to attempt subsequent events. Even if they did badly. Now I think the reason for this is because most students don't understand the distinguishing features of both the adjusting and non-adjusting event. Now, do remember this is a fundamental topic originating from F7. There is no good reason to avoid this. Right? You must know the difference between the two. Worse, students don't fully comprehend the review and completion process. This is another poorly attempted topic. And very often it's because of the lack of work experience that contributed to the inability to answer this topic of subsequent events. Now finally, the last unimportant topic is audit report and opinions. Now, students I know of, they hated this a lot because they are not able to tell what is pervasive and what isn't. So therefore, for certain sitting, at least for now, April 2018, we still have the format of exams where, you still have an option, right, to choose 2 questions out of 3 for section B. But moving on, all of the section B questions will be compulsory. So you will have to be familiar with almost all topics. I suggest to everyone out there that you should practice the questions on the topic anyway, right? Whether you think it will occur or not, because it's a core topic in audit, right? and not being able to answer this can be quite costly. Don't forget the differences between KM and EOM and OM. The differences are very significant, yet very few students are able to appreciate how different they are. Right. So that's this. Right. So others. Finally, don't forget what Einstein said about this, that insanity lies in repeating the same and hoping for different outcomes. Right. So as you prepare the exams, be structured, be organized, plan to succeed. Right. Don't leave it to luck. Right. Now, how do you ensure that you plan to succeed? Practice the past 3 years of exam papers. Ensure that you're familiar with the process. Then you have done your best. Right. So at this juncture, I wish all of you the best of luck in the coming exams, right? And if you're going to attend my revision class, then, well, I'll see you in the revision class. Don't forget that the biggest determinant in success in the exams is yourself, and yourself only, right? Many students come to class and think that attending class is good enough to pass the exam, but for this paper, it's very specific. You can't depend only on the lecturer. You have to depend on yourself to work through the past questions. Right, that's important, right? Okay, and finally, feel free to drop me a mail at wildy231@gmail.com if you have any questions. So I spoke at length, and I hope that this shed some light on the topic, right? And take note of this. Most students have, based on my observation at Kaplan, most students have no difficulty with the time management, but they have a lot of difficulty with the subject content. Yes, the subject content, the FRS, the SSA, and the fundamental topics from F8. Most take it for granted that you don't have to revise the F8 topic. And let me quote you this, that students who did very well, you'll be very surprised. They all had one characteristic, that is, they were hardworking and they were willing to work through it. I hope finally that you can give your best and don't think too much about failing, but ensure that you have planned sufficiently, and that gives you a reasonable chance of passing the exams. Right? Thank you for listening. I wish you the best of luck, and should you have any questions or anything else that you wish to ask, feel free to drop me a mail. Right? I'm Wildy Chia, and I'm from Singapore, so this is dedicated to students who are taking the P7, the Singapore variant. Right. Thank you once again, and have a good day.